This is the Breaking Up with Binge Eating podcast, where every listen moves you one step closer to complete food freedom. Hosted by me, Georgie Fear, and my team at Confident Eaters. Have you ever walked into a movie theater, smelled the popcorn, and suddenly felt like the popcorn was not just an option, but a required part of the movie itself? Or maybe it's not movies for you. Maybe it's the beach. You picture the towels, the sunscreen, the water, the book you're definitely going to bring and probably not read. And right alongside all of that, your brain starts packing chips, candy, drinks, snacks for the drive, snacks for the blanket, snacks for after the swimming. Or maybe for you, it's road trips. You stop for gas, and before you even get out of the car, your brain is already wandering down the candy aisle. Or maybe it's your couch at night when the show starts and some part of your brain says, "Great, this is where the crunchy thing goes." That's what we're talking about today. Autopilot urges. The kind that can lead to snacking, grazing, emotional eating, or a full binge before you feel like you've really chosen anything. I want to define them very simply. Autopilot urges are the urges that happen when your brain recognizes a familiar scene and says, "This is when we eat," or "This goes with food." This is when we eat, this goes with food. That's the whole script. And when I say autopilot urges, I'm talking about the whole range of automatic eating patterns. This might be a snack you barely notice yourself reaching for. It might be grazing while you cook or eating in front of the television when you're not hungry. It might be an episode of emotional eating. And yes, it might be an autopilot binge. Those are not different species of food problem. They're the same animal showing up at different sizes and intensities. Same learning system, same cue and response pathway. So even though some of my examples today will sound very ordinary, popcorn at the movies, candy on road trips, snacks on the couch, I don't want you to hear this as an episode about harmless snacking quirks. We're talking about the eating that has become automatic, whether that means a few handfuls you didn't really choose, or a binge that seems to start as soon as that familiar scene appears. Eating that's automatic that doesn't bother you, we have no business worrying about. But if it bothers you, it can be really helpful to understand this behavior better so that you can change it. Autopilot urges tend to show up in two very common states. The first is when we're stressed and want to check out. The day has been too much, the emotions are too heavy, the demands keep coming. In that state, autopilot eating can feel like a way to turn down the volume on your life for a while. The second is when we finally relax and get to stop putting effort into anything. The work is done, the kids are in bed, the dishes are mostly handled, and some part of you says, "I am off duty. Please do not make me think." In that state, autopilot eating may not feel like distress. It may actually feel like ease or letting go. The problem is that when the thinking, present part of your mind goes offline, the old food script can take over without much supervision. So, whether the starting point is stress or relief, the pattern is similar. Less presence, less consciously choosing to eat, and more reliance on whatever route your brain already knows as habit. It might be, "This is when we eat," as in after dinner, when the kids go to bed, or when I get home from work, or when I finish a stressful task, or when I start cooking dinner, when I finally have a minute to myself. Your brain says, "This is when we eat." Or it might be, "This goes with food." That can pop up in circumstances like movies go with popcorn, TV goes with chips, beach days go with pretzels, road trips go with candy, coffee goes with muffins, etc. And these are not necessarily dramatic urges. They're not always the kind where you feel like you're white knuckling your way through a crisis. Sometimes they're incredibly ordinary. You're not sobbing in the pantry. You're just in a scene your brain recognizes, and your brain starts reaching for the food that it feels belongs there. This is why autopilot urges can feel so confusing. If you only know how to look for hunger, restriction, or emotional distress, you might think, but I wasn't that upset. I wasn't even that hungry. I wasn't even having a bad day. Why did I want food so badly? And the answer might be because your brain knew the scene, and the scene itself was the cue. This is learned behavior. Your brain, as I've said before, is a prediction machine. It constantly asks, what usually happens next? It does this to save energy. You do not want to consciously rebuild every routine from scratch every time you move through your day. Imagine if every morning you had to think, okay, now I'm holding a toothbrush. What might this be for? Should I put it in my hair? No, your brain says, we know this one, and just runs the program automatically. And this is wonderful when the program is useful. It saves a ton of effort. It's less wonderful when the program is sit on the couch, open bag, eat past satisfaction, feel foggy, feel disappointed, promise tomorrow will be different. With autopilot urges, the food may not be the beginning of the pattern. It may be the next expected step. The brain recognizes this setup and starts preparing for the food that usually follows. Once that anticipation starts, it can feel surprisingly compelling, even if you were not thinking about food 5 minutes ago. This is where dopamine often gets dragged into the conversation in a very oversimplified way. Online, dopamine gets described as if it's just a pleasure chemical, like your brain has a little confetti cannon that goes off when you eat a cookie. But dopamine is much more involved in wanting, learning, salience, motivation, and pursuit. It helps your brain notice what matters and what's worth moving toward. So when a certain situation has repeatedly predicted a rewarding food experience, the situation itself can become important. It can start the wanting before you have consciously decided anything. Your brain has rehearsed a route many times. And one of the most helpful ways to understand this is to notice what happens when the familiar route disappears. You can see this so clearly when people go on vacation. Someone may describe themselves as a professional grazer at home. They snack while cooking, they snack while walking through the kitchen, while reading the paper after dinner, snack before the dinner is ready. They snack because the evening has that familiar pull. And they snack because the couch automatically goes with snacks in their mind. But then they go away for a week and they come back and they tell me they barely snacked at all. And it's tempting to say, well, vacation's just different. Yeah, that is exactly the point. The person didn't become a different human being on vacation. The brain didn't get a software update in the hotel lobby. What changed was the context. The familiar kitchen was gone. The pantry full of chips and cereal and pretzels wasn't there. The couch was different. The day had a different rhythm. There may have been more novelty, more excitement, more people around, or simply fewer chances to wander through the same food environment on autopilot. The same thing can happen when a person is a guest in someone else's house. The urge to overeat may barely appear, not because they're magically cured, but because that old script doesn't run in the unfamiliar surroundings. They're not standing in their usual kitchen spot. They're not opening their own cupboard. They may not feel as comfortable grazing through somebody else's pantry. The meals might be more structured. The private little pathway that exists at home gets interrupted. And that is useful information. If an urge weakens or disappears when the environment changes, it tells us how much the urge is linked to that context. It's not fake, it's not imagined or all in your head in the dismissive way people say that phrase, but the urge is cued, learned, and environment linked. The vacation version of you is in a different cue environment, which means changing cues at home can help too. This is where I want to connect back to the idea of guardrails. In the last episode, I spoke about how recovery does not have to mean doing everything the hard way. You are allowed and encouraged to make the next helpful step easier. With autopilot urges, that might mean changing the choreography, doing different things, or doing the same things but in a different order. So the old food script does not start automatically. These are guardrails you're auditioning. I like that word, auditioning, because we're not signing a lifetime contract with herbal tea. We're not promising that every evening from now until the end of civilization will involve a jigsaw puzzle. We're not trying to become someone who handles every urge by sipping something warm and gazing serenely into the distance. We are simply testing, does this support help me stay more awake inside the moment? Some guardrails you'll find helpful, some you won't. That doesn't mean you failed. It means the audition gave you information. Maybe gum works perfectly for you on a road trip because it helps you get through the first candy free repetitions of making that familiar stop for gas. Maybe tea after dinner gives your hands and mouth something to do while your brain learns that the evening can actually begin a different way. Maybe a puzzle works better than TV because it changes the whole scene instead of placing you in the old snack circumstances. Maybe reading sounds lovely in theory, but after a long day, your brain has the attention span of a wet sock, and that's not the right guardrail for that moment. The point is not to find the most virtuous substitute. The point is to find support that helps you practice a new routine. Before we talk more about changing the choreography, I want to spend a minute on one of the most common places autopilot urges show up: entertainment. In fact, I like to call it eatertainment. Food and entertainment get braided together very easily. And honestly, some of this is completely normal. Food is social, food is cultural and sensory. It's part of the celebration, ritual, and fun of an event. I am not here to be the popcorn police. The issue is when the pairing becomes so automatic that you no longer have a choice. The show starts and the bag opens. The gas station appears and candy bars feel like part of the route. At that point, the question isn't, is popcorn bad? The question is, did I choose to have popcorn or did the movie theater choose for me? And this is why I'm encouraging you to experiment with separating food from entertainment, at least some of the time. Not because eating during a movie is wrong, not because road trip snacks make you a bad person, because when food gets folded into an autopilot script, you often don't actually enjoy it as much as you otherwise would. Think about driving a route that you know really well. Maybe it's your path home from work, or your usual way to the grocery store, or the route you take to a friend's house. You know each turn, you know the lights. Your brain has driven this so many times that sometimes you can arrive and have that little moment of, oh, I'm here. You made the trip, but you barely registered it. You didn't enjoy the view. You didn't notice the houses or the trees or the sky. You were moving through a very familiar sequence while your attention was somewhere else. Autopilot eating can work the same way. You can eat the popcorn, the chips, the candy, or cookies, and then come to a few minutes later with the food mostly gone and very little pleasure actually received. Technically, you ate it, but did you enjoy it? Did you taste it? Did it satisfy? Or did your brain just run through the script? That's the part I want you to get curious about. Not how can I become the kind of person who never eats during entertainment, but am I actually getting the pleasure I came for? Because if the answer is no, then separating the food from the activity is not about being stricter, it's about getting out of the fog. Watching the movie and noticing the movie, eating the snack and noticing the snack. Let each of your pleasures have enough attention to actually become satisfying. A question I love to ask here is, would it still be good without the usual snacks? Would the movie still be funny? Would the beach still feel relaxing? Sometimes the answer is yes. And you may realize, actually, I do want to watch this movie. I really do enjoy sitting on the beach. I do like curling up with this book. The food was just attached to the activity because it always has been. Other times, the answer may be, honestly, no, this isn't really any enjoyment without food. And that is useful information. Maybe the activity is not actually that restorative. Maybe you're bored. Maybe the movie is just background noise while you look for stimulation. Maybe TV has become less of a pleasure and more of a default time killer. Maybe food has been carrying the whole experience. That question is not meant to take pleasure away. It's meant to help you locate the pleasure in your life more accurately. If an activity only feels good with food attached, you may need better entertainment, better rest, better connection, or a more genuinely satisfying way to spend that time. And this is where changing the choreography becomes very practical. Changing the choreography means you change one step in the sequence so that old script doesn't run quite as automatically. Not because the old script is bad, just because you want more choice in the process. This is where substitutions can be useful, but I need to be really clear about what I mean by substitution. I don't mean that drinking a chamomile tea is going to solve your life better than candy, or that painting your nails is the secret psychological key that food could never provide. Sometimes the substitute is not there because it's deeper, wiser, or more emotionally profound. Sometimes a substitute works because your brain is expecting something to happen, so you give it something different. Your brain says, food goes with this. And you say, actually, today chamomile tea goes with this. Or your brain says, now we eat. And you say, actually, now we're going to put nail polish on our nails. That might sound ridiculously simple, but this is how new choreography gets rehearsed. At first, the old pattern may still feel very loud. If every road trip has included gas station candy bars for years, your brain is not going to instantly forget that because you bought an iced tea. It may still say, excuse me, where's the candy? We had a whole thing. But now you have started giving that cue a different outcome. Gas station no longer has to mean candy bar. After dinner no longer has to mean couch and snacks. It could mean tea. It could mean a walk. It could mean a puzzle. It can mean opening a book or sitting outside. It can mean anything that helps you get through those first few repetitions of experiencing the cue without including the usual autopilot food. That last part matters. The first few repetitions will be the hardest. That old script is familiar, and familiar can be very convincing. So a substitute gives your brain something concrete to do while it learns, oh, maybe this scene has more than one possible thing that can fit in that slot. It's about giving your brain a new association to try on. So I would not ask, do I like this better? At least not right away. You might not. The old choreography may feel more natural simply because you've practiced it more. Instead, ask better questions. Did I feel more conscious? Did I feel more present for the activity I was engaged in? Did the activity still feel worth doing, even without the usual food attached? And I want to emphasize, the goal is not to remove food from pleasure. The goal is to stop losing the pleasure of your activities or your foods to autopilot. A lot of people hear advice about changing these sort of habits and they brace for deprivation. They think, great, now I can't eat popcorn at the movies. I can't snack at the beach. I can't have my road trip candy bars. What the heck? No, absolutely not. Food can absolutely be a part of entertainment, celebration, and pleasure. The question is whether it's chosen, satisfying, and flexible. My goal for you is to be able to enjoy the road trip with or without the candy aisle, enjoy the TV with or without snacks, not rigidly having to default into having both at the same time. I want you to have access to both options. Now, I want to add an important caveat here because sometimes autopilot eating is not just a cute little habit loop. Sometimes the autopilot binge is part of a bigger pattern of zoning out. Sometimes food and entertainment becomes a default way to leave your life for a while. That may sound dramatic, but some people out there listening know exactly what I mean. The television goes on, the food comes out, and for a little while, you don't have to feel the loneliness, the disappointment, the resentment, the grief, boredom, the sense that your days don't feel like yours, or the ache of living a life that's not matching what you hoped it would be. This is not really about the chips at that point. It's about the fog. It's about getting stimulated enough, numbed enough that you can stop feeling so aware of what hurts. And if that's what's happening, then gum is probably not going to touch it. Tea is not going to solve this. This is where we have to be honest. Some urges are asking for a choreography change. Some urges are asking for a better guardrail. And some are pointing to a life that needs more care, more connection, more agency, more support, or more truth. That doesn't mean you have to figure it out and solve your whole life tonight. Don't try that, please. But it does mean we should not pretend that every binge pattern can be fixed with a beverage. I mean, tea's lovely. Tea is not a life raft. Sometimes the question isn't, what can I substitute for the snack? Sometimes the question is, what am I so desperate to get away from? Or what would need to change so that I didn't need to disappear every evening? Those are bigger questions, and they deserve more tenderness. They may need therapy, coaching, practical help, grief work, or tiny steps toward a life that feels less like something to endure. But even naming the truth moves you forward. Because if food is helping you leave your life for a while, then the long term work is not just eating differently, but helping your life become a place you're happy to come back to. This is why I like the phrase change the choreography so much. We're not trying to attack the urge or fight it off at the very last second. We want to change the dance steps earlier in the pattern. When you're dancing different steps, the urge to eat the way you used to might not even show up. Now, I want to give you a simple experiment for this week. Choose one autopilot eating script, just one. Pick something specific like TV and snacks, after dinner and sweets, cheese and crackers when I walk in the door, coffee and a muffin. Something where your brain tends to say, this is when we eat, or this goes with food. For the first few times it comes up, simply name the script. Oh, this is my TV goes with chips script. Or, oh, this is my after dinner means ice cream script. Naming it matters. It creates a little space and reminds you that this is not an emergency, it's just a learned pattern. Then ask yourself 3 questions. First, would this still be good without the usual snacks involved? Second, do I actually want food right now? Or is my brain adding it just to complete the scene? Third, if I do want food, what kind and amount would actually make this experience better? Notice that the third question does allow for eating. This is not a trap where you're not allowed to decide that you actually want the food. The point is to choose not to just obey an old script without thinking. Then try out one guardrail. Maybe the guardrail is a substitution, such as gum while cooking or a planned snack instead of continuous grazing throughout your workday. Maybe the guardrail is a different activity. Instead of plopping onto the couch, maybe it's more helpful for you to organize your clothes for the next day, or do a puzzle instead of scrolling, or walk the dog or take a shower. Maybe the guardrail is separating the two pleasures. Maybe you eat dessert at the table before you go watch television, instead of doing them at the same time. Maybe the guardrail is changing a bit of your environment. Maybe you move the snack food out of sight, or you sit in a chair instead of on the couch. Whatever you change, I want you to evaluate it like a scientist, not a judge. Do not start with, did I like this better than the old pattern? Because the answer is honestly probably not. At least not yet. The old choreography may feel smoother and wanted because it's familiar. Ask instead, did this help me stay more conscious? Did it help me get through the queue without automatically following that old food script? And did the activity still feel worth doing without food involved? If the answer is yes, try that guardrail again. If the answer is no, adjust the experiment. Either way, you are learning how to bring choice back into your life. If you discover that a certain activity really does not feel good without food, that can be some of the most useful information you get. Maybe the activity is not satisfying. Maybe you're tired, lonely, or needing an evening that feels more like care and less like collapse. Autopilot urges happen because your brain is good at learning patterns. And remember, because your brain can learn, it can also update that learning. These patterns can feel so automatic that they seem permanent, but they aren't. With enough kindness, enough repetition, and the right supports, you can teach your brain the new route. If you want help understanding your eating patterns and building recovery that actually fits your life, you can learn more about coaching at confidenteaters.com. And if you enjoy the show and want to support it, subscribe to the paid version for $5 a month. It helps keep the podcast going, and you get bunches of extra episodes. If subscribing is not possible for you, you can support the show for free by leaving a review or telling somebody about it. I'll see you next time. If you need me, you know how to reach me. GeorgieFear@gmail.com.